The Crimean Khanate, own name, Great Horde and Deshti Kipchak, in Old European historiography and geography, Little Tartary was a Crimean Tatar state existing from 1441 to 1783, the longest-lived of the Turkic Khanates that succeeded the empire of the Golden Horde. Established by Hakkı Göray in 1441, it was regarded as the direct heir to the Golden Horde and to Deshti Kipchak. In 1783, violating the 1774 Treaty of Küçükçayırca, the Russian Empire annexed the Khanate. Among the European powers, only France came out with an open protest against this act, due to the long-standing Franco-Ottoman alliance. Naming and geography. Crimean Khans, considering their state as the heir and legal successor of the Golden Horde and Deshti Kipchak, called themselves Khans of the Great Horde, the Great State and the Throne of the Crimea. The full title of the Crimean Khans, used in official documents and correspondence with foreign rulers, varying slightly from document to document during the 3 centuries of the Khanate's existence, was as follows: by the grace and help of the blessed and highest Lord, the great Padishah of the Great Horde, and the Great State, and the Throne of the Crimea, and all the Nogai, and the mountain Circassians, and the Tatsant of Gox, and the Kipchak steppe and all the Tatars. According to Alexa Havoronsky, the inhabitants of the Crimean Khanate in Crimean Tatar usually referred to their state as Qrm Yurtu, Crimean Yurt, which can be translated into English as the country of Crimea or Crimean country. English-speaking writers during the 18th and early 19th centuries often called the territory of the Crimean Khanate and of the Lesser Nogai Horde Little Tartary and Kuban Tartary. The name Little Tartary distinguished the area from Tartary, those areas of Central and Northern Asia inhabited by Turkic peoples or Tatars. The London-based cartographer Herman Moll in a map of circa 1729 shows Little Tartary as including the Crimean Peninsula and the steppe between Dnieper and Neuse River as far north as the Dnieper Bend and the Upper Tor River. The Khanate included the Crimean Peninsula and the adjacent steppes, mostly corresponding to the parts of South Ukraine between the Dnieper and the Donets rivers. The territory controlled by the Crimean Khanate shifted throughout its existence due to the constant incursions by the Cossacks, who had lived along the Don since the disintegration of the Golden Horde in the 15th century. History. Prehistory. The first known Turkic peoples appeared in Crimea in the 6th century, during the conquest of the Crimea by the Turkic Khaganate. In the 11th century, Cumans appeared in Crimea, who later became the ruling and state-forming people of the Golden Horde and the Crimean Khanate. In the middle of the 13th century, the northern steppe lands of the Crimea, inhabited mainly by Turkic peoples, Cumans, became the possession of Ulus Juche, known as the Golden Horde or Ulu Ulus. In this era, the role of Turkic peoples increased. Since this time, the local Kipchaks took the name of Tatars. In the Horde period, the Khans of the Golden Horde were the supreme rulers of the Crimea, but their governors, emirs, exercised direct control. The first formally recognized ruler in the Crimea is considered Eren Timur, the nephew of Batu Khan of the Golden Horde, who received this area from Mengu Timur, and the first center of the Crimea was the ancient city Qrm. This name then gradually spread to the entire peninsula. The second center of Crimea was the valley adjacent to Qrq and Bagsasare. The multi-ethnic population of Crimea then consisted mainly of those who lived in the steppe and foothills of the peninsula: Kipchaks, Crimean Greeks, Crimean Goths, Alans, and Armenians, who lived mainly in cities and mountain villages. The Crimean nobility was mostly of both Kipchak and Hordan origin. Horde rule for the peoples who inhabited the Crimean peninsula was, in general, painful. The rulers of the Golden Horde repeatedly organized punitive campaigns in the Crimea, when the local population refused to pay tribute. A well-known campaign of the Nogai Khan in 1299, as a result of which a number of Crimean cities suffered. As in other regions of the Horde, separatist tendencies soon began to manifest themselves in Crimea. In 1303, in Crimea, the most famous written monument of the Kipchak or Cuman language was created, Codex Cumanicus, which is the oldest memorial of the Crimean Tatar language and of great importance for the history of Kipchak and Oghuz dialects, as directly related to the Kipchaks of the Black Sea steppes in Crimea. There are legends that in the 14th century, the Crimea was repeatedly ravaged by the Army Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Grand Duke of Lithuania Olgerd broke the Tatar army in 1363 near the mouth of the Dnieper, and then invaded the Crimea, devastated Chersonsos and seized valuable church objects there. There is a similar legend about his successor Vitovt, who in 1397 went on a Crimean campaign to Kaffa and again destroyed Chersonsos. Vitovt is also known in Crimean history for giving refuge in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania to a significant number of Tatars and Karaites, whose descendants now live in Lithuania and Belarus. In 1399 Vitovt, who came to the aid of the Horde Khan Toktamish, was defeated on the banks of the Vorskla River by Toktamish's rival Timur Kutluk, on whose behalf the Horde was ruled by the Emir Edigi, and made peace. During the reign of Kaniki Ham, Toktamish's daughter, in Qrq or, she supported Hak I Garay in the struggle against the descendants of Toktamish, Kichi Muhammada and Sayyid Ahmad, who as well as Hak Garay claimed full power in the Crimea and probably saw him as her heir to the Crimean throne. In the sources of the 16th, 18th centuries, the opinion according to which the separation of the Crimean Tatar state was raised to Toktamish, and Kaniki was the most important figure in this process, completely prevailed. Establishment. The Crimean Khanate originated in the early 15th century when certain clans of the Golden Horde Empire ceased their nomadic life in the Deshtai Kipchak and decided to make Crimea their yurt. At that time, the Golden Horde of the Mongol Empire had governed the Crimean Peninsula as an ulus since 1239, with its capital at Qairam. The local separatists invited a Genghisid contender for the Golden Horde throne, Hak Garay, to become their Khan. Hak Garay accepted their invitation and traveled from exile in Lithuania. He warred for independence against the Horde from 1420 to 1441, in the end achieving success. But Hak Garay then had to fight off internal rivals before he could ascend the throne of the Khanate in 1449, after which he moved its capital to Qrq. The Khanate included the Crimean Peninsula as well as the adjacent steppe, Ottoman Protectorate. The sons of Hak I Garay contended against each other to succeed him. The Ottomans intervened and installed one of the sons, Menli I Garay, on the throne. Menli I Garay took the imperial title sovereign of 2 continents and Khan of Khans of 2 seas. In 1475 the Ottoman forces, under the command of Jedik Ahmet Pasha, conquered the Greek Principality of Theodoro and the Genoese colonies at Cembalo, Sadaya, and Kaffa. Thenceforth the Khanate was a protectorate of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Sultan enjoyed veto power over the selection of new Crimean Khans. The empire annexed the Crimean coast but recognized the legitimacy of the Khanate rule of the steppes, as the Khans were descendants of Genghis Khan. In 1475, the Ottomans imprisoned Menli I Garay for 3 years for resisting the invasion. After returning from captivity in Constantinople, he accepted the suzerainty of the Ottoman Empire. Nevertheless, Ottoman sultans treated the Khans more as allies than subjects. The Khans continued to have a foreign policy independent from the Ottomans in the steppes of Little Tartary. The Khans continued to mint coins and use their names in Friday prayers, 2 important signs of sovereignty. They did not pay tribute to the Ottoman Empire, instead the Ottomans paid them in return for their services of providing skilled outriders and frontline cavalry in their campaigns. Later on, Crimea lost power in this relationship as the result of a crisis in 1523, during the reign of Menli's successor, Mehmed I Garay. He died that year, and beginning with his successor, from 1524 on, Crimean Khans were appointed by the Sultan. The alliance of the Crimean Tatars and the Ottomans was comparable to the Polish-Lithuanian Union in its importance and durability. The Crimean cavalry became indispensable for the Ottomans' campaigns against Poland, Hungary, and Persia. Victory over the Golden Horde. In 1502, Menli I Garay defeated the last Khan of the Great Horde, which put an end to the Horde's claims on Crimea. The Khanate initially chose as its capital Salisk near the Qrq fortress. Later, the capital was moved a short distance to Basisari, founded in 1532 by Sahib I Garay. Both Salisk and the Qrq fortress today are part of the expanded city of Basisari. Slave trade. The slave trade was the backbone of the economy of the Crimean Khanate. However, some historians are of the opinion that the role of the slave trade in the economy of the Crimean Khanate is greatly exaggerated by modern historians, and the raiding economy is nothing but a historical myth. The Crimeans frequently mounted raids into the Danubian principalities, Poland, Lithuania, and Muscovy to enslave people whom they could capture. For each captive, the Khan received a fixed share of 10% or 20%. These campaigns by Crimean forces were either Sefers, officially declared military operations led by the Khans themselves, or sapules, raids undertaken by groups of noblemen, sometimes illegally because they contravened treaties concluded by the Khans with neighboring rulers. For a long time, until the early 18th century, the Khanate maintained a massive slave trade with the Ottoman Empire and in the Middle East, exporting about 2 million slaves from Russia and Poland-Lithuania over the period 1500 to 1700. Kaffa, an Ottoman city on Crimean Peninsula, was one of the best-known and significant trading ports and slave markets. In 1769, a last major Tatar raid resulted in the capture of 20,000 Russian and Ruthenian slaves. Author and historian Brian Glynn Williams writes, Fisher estimates that in the 16th century the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth lost around 20,000 individuals a year and that from 1474 to 1694, as many as 1 million Commonwealth citizens were carried off into Crimean slavery. Early modern sources are full of descriptions of sufferings of Christian slaves captured by the Crimean Tatars in the course of their raids. It seems that the position and everyday conditions of a slave depended largely on his/her owner. Some slaves indeed could spend the rest of their days doing exhausting labor, as the Crimean vizier Sefer Ghazi Aga mentions in one of his letters. The slaves were often a plow and a scythe of their owners. Most terrible, perhaps, was the fate of those who became galley slaves, whose sufferings were poeticized in many Ukrainian Duma. Both female and male slaves were often used for sexual purposes. Alliances and conflicts with Poland and Zaporozhian Cossacks. The Crimeans had a complex relationship with Zaporozhian Cossacks who lived to the north of the Khanate in the modern Ukraine. The Cossacks provided a measure of protection against Tatar raids for Poland-Lithuania and received subsidies for their service. They also raided Crimean and Ottoman possessions in the region. At times Crimean Khanate made alliances with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and the Zaporizhian Zich. The assistance of Islam III Guray during the Khmelnytsky uprising in 1648 contributed greatly to the initial momentum of military successes for the Cossacks. The relationship with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was also exclusive, as it was the home dynasty of the Gurays, who sought sanctuary in Lithuania in the 15th century before establishing themselves on the Crimean Peninsula. Struggle with Muscovy. In the middle of the 16th century, the Crimean Khanate asserted a claim to be the successor to the Golden Horde, which entailed asserting the right of rule over the Tatar Khanates of the Caspian Volga region, particularly the Kazan Khanate and Astrakhan Khanate. This claim pitted it against Muscovy for dominance in the region. A successful campaign by Devlet I Guray upon the Russian capital in 1571 culminated in the burning of Moscow, and he thereby gained the sobriquet, that Algan. The following year, however, the Crimean Khanate lost access to the Volga once and for all due to its catastrophic defeat in the battle at Molody. Don Cossacks reached Lower Don, Donets and Azov by 1580s and thus became the northeastern neighbors of the Khanate. They attracted peasants, serfs and gentry fleeing internal conflicts, overpopulation and intensifying exploitation. Just as Zaporozhians protected the southern borders of the Commonwealth, Don Cossacks protected Muscovy and themselves attacked the Khanate and Ottoman fortresses. Relationship with Circassians. Under the influence of the Crimean Tatars and of the Ottoman Empire, large numbers of Circassians converted to Islam from Christianity. Circassian mercenaries and recruits played an important role in the Khans' armies. Khans often married Circassian women, and it was a custom for young Crimean princes to spend time in Circassia training in the art of warfare. Several conflicts occurred between Circassians and Crimean Tatars in the 18th century, with the former defeating an army of Khan Kaplan Guray and Ottoman auxiliaries in the Battle of Khanzal. Decline. The Turkish traveler-writer Evliya Çelebi mentions the impact of Cossack raids from Ozak upon the territories of the Crimean Khanate. These raids ruined trade routes and severely depopulated many important regions. By the time Evliya Çelebi had arrived, almost all the towns he visited were affected by the Cossack raids. In fact, the only place Evliya Çelebi considered safe from the Cossacks was the Ottoman fortress at Arabat. The decline of the Crimean Khanate was a consequence of the weakening of the Ottoman Empire and a change in Eastern Europe's balance of power favoring its neighbors. Crimean Tatars often returned from Ottoman campaigns without booty, and Ottoman subsidies were less likely for unsuccessful campaigns. Without sufficient guns, the Tatar cavalry suffered a significant loss against European and Russian armies with modern equipment. By the late 17th century, Muscovite Russia became too strong a power for Crimea to pillage, and the Treaty of Karlowitz outlawed further raids. The era of great slave raids in Russia and Ukraine was over, although brigands and Nogay raiders continued their attacks and Russian hatred of the Khanate did not decrease. These politico-economic losses led in turn to erosion of the Khan's support among noble clans, and internal conflicts for power ensued. The Nogays, who provided a significant portion of the Crimean military forces, also took back their support from the Khans towards the end of the empire. In the first half of 17th century, Kalmyks formed the Kalmyk Khanate in the Lower Volga, and under Ayuka Khan conducted many military expeditions against the Crimean Khanate and Nogays. By becoming an important ally and later part of the Russian Empire and taking an oath to protect its southeastern borders, the Kalmyk Khanate took an active part in all Russian war campaigns in 17th and 18th centuries, providing up to 40,000 fully equipped horsemen. The united Russian and Ukrainian forces attacked the Khanate during the Chigirin campaigns and the Crimean campaigns. It was during the Russo-Turkish War, 1735–1739, that the Russians, under the command of Field Marshal Munich, finally managed to penetrate the Crimean Peninsula itself, burning and destroying everything on their way. More warfare ensued during the reign of Catherine II. The Russo-Turkish War, 1768–1774, resulted in the Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca, which made the Crimean Khanate independent from the Ottoman Empire and unaligned it with the Russian Empire. The rule of the last Crimean Khan Shahin Giray was marked with increasing Russian influence and outbursts of violence from the Khan administration towards internal opposition. On April 8, 1783, in violation of the treaty, Catherine II intervened in the civil war, de facto annexing the whole peninsula as the Torda Governorate. In 1787, Shahin Giray took refuge in the Ottoman Empire and was eventually executed, on Rhodes, by the Ottoman authorities for betrayal. The royal Giray family survives to this day. Through the 1792 Treaty of Jassy, the Russian frontier was extended to the Dniester River and the takeover of Yerevan was complete. The 1812 Treaty of Bucharest transferred Bessarabia to Russian control.